What happens when one of Hollywood's most intense actors sits down with a talk show host who thinks she knows everything about his personal life? You're about to witness the most explosive television interview that almost never made it to air. Before we dive into this incredible clash, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this story is absolutely wild from start to finish. Tom Hardy walked into the studio that morning expecting a routine promotional interview for his latest film. The British actor, known for his roles in Mad Max and Venom, had done hundreds of these appearances over the years. What he didn't expect was to be blindsided by Joy Behar's aggressive questioning style and her apparent need to make the interview all about her political opinions rather than his work. As the cameras rolled and the show's theme music faded, Joy Behar leaned forward with that signature smirk that regular viewers know all too well. She had clearly done her homework, but not on Hardy's film. Instead, she had spent her time digging up every controversial comment he had ever made about method acting, his past struggles, and his views on various social issues. "So, Tom," Joy began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I have to ask you about some of the things you've said in past interviews. You've been quite vocal about your approach to preparing for roles, and frankly, some people find your methods a bit extreme. Don't you think actors today are just a little too self-important?" Hardy shifted in his chair, clearly caught off guard by the hostile tone. He had expected questions about his latest project, not a personal attack disguised as journalism. His jaw tightened slightly, a telltale sign that anyone who knew the actor would recognize as a warning. "I'm sorry, what exactly are you referring to?" Hardy asked, his English accent carrying a hint of irritation. "I came here to discuss my new film, which I thought was the purpose of this interview." Joy waved her hand dismissively, as if his actual reason for being there was irrelevant. "Oh, please, we can talk about the movie later. What I want to know is why you think your way of doing things is so much better than everyone else's. You've criticized other actors for not taking their craft seriously enough. Isn't that a bit hypocritical coming from someone who used to struggle with addiction?" The studio fell silent. Even the other hosts looked uncomfortable with Joy's line of questioning. Whoopi Goldberg shot her a warning glance, but Joy was clearly determined to push forward with her ambush-style interview. Hardy's expression darkened. "I'm sorry, are you seriously bringing up my personal struggles as some kind of gotcha moment? That's incredibly unprofessional, even for daytime television." "I'm just asking the questions our viewers want answered," Joy shot back, clearly enjoying the confrontation. "You put yourself out there as this serious actor, this method actor who goes to extremes. But you've had your own problems, haven't you? So who are you to judge others?" "I've never judged anyone," Hardy replied, his voice remaining controlled but his eyes flashing with anger. "I've spoken about my own experiences and my own process. If you had actually watched any of my interviews instead of just looking for sound bites to twist, you would know that." Joy leaned back in her chair with a satisfied smile, clearly thinking she had scored some kind of point. "Well, that's not how it came across to a lot of people. Maybe you need to think about how your words affect others before you speak." The irony of Joy Behar lecturing anyone about thinking before speaking was not lost on Hardy or the studio audience. Several people in the crowd could be heard murmuring their disapproval of her tactics. "You know what?" Hardy said, his voice getting slightly louder. "I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I was told this was going to be a conversation about my work, not a therapy session where you get to play amateur psychologist." "Oh, I'm sorry," Joy said with mock concern. "Did I hurt your feelings? I thought tough guys like you could handle a few hard questions." That comment clearly crossed a line. Hardy's composure, which had been hanging by a thread, finally snapped. "Tough guys? What exactly is that supposed to mean? Are you trying to goad me into some kind of reaction so you can have your little viral moment?" "I'm just having a conversation," Joy replied innocently, though her smirk suggested otherwise. "If you can't handle normal questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews." "Normal questions?" Hardy laughed bitterly. "Is it normal to ambush your guests with personal attacks? Is it normal to completely ignore the reason they're here? Because if that's your definition of normal, then I think we have very different standards." The tension in the studio was now palpable. Camera operators were getting close-ups of both Hardy and Joy, sensing that something explosive was about to happen. The other hosts were clearly uncomfortable, with Sunny Hostin looking particularly concerned about where this was heading. Joy, however, seemed to be feeding off the conflict, Look, I've been doing this show for years, and I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities. Most of them can handle a little pushback without getting all dramatic about it. Dramatic? Hardy's voice rose slightly. You call bringing up someone's personal struggles and then mocking them dramatic? What would you call what you're doing right now? I call it journalism, Joy replied smugly. Something you Hollywood types aren't used to dealing with anymore. Everyone's too worried about offending you precious celebrities. Hardy stood up from his chair, clearly having reached his limit. Journalism? This isn't journalism. This is tabloid garbage masquerading as legitimate television. And I'm not going to sit here and be your punching bag so you can feel relevant. The audience gasped as Hardy removed his microphone and placed it on the coffee table. Joy's eyes widened, clearly not expecting this level of pushback from her guest. Where are you going? She demanded. We're not finished here. Oh, we're definitely finished, Hardy replied coldly. But apparently you're just getting started. Joy Behar wasn't about to let her guest walk away without getting the last word. As Hardy placed his microphone on the table, she leaned forward aggressively, her voice rising to match his intensity. Oh, so you're just going to run away when things get a little uncomfortable? That's very mature, Joy called out, her tone dripping with sarcasm. I guess the tough guy image is just an act after all. Hardy stopped dead in his tracks. The comment hit exactly the nerve Joy had been aiming for, and she knew it. A satisfied grin spread across her face as she watched him slowly turn back around. Run away? Hardy repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. Lady, I've been sitting here for 10 minutes while you've done everything except your job. But if you want to keep this going, then let's really talk. Finally, Joy said, clapping her hands together mockingly. Now we're getting somewhere. Sit back down and let's have a real conversation. No, I think I'll stand, thanks, Hardy replied, crossing his arms. Because unlike you, I don't need to hide behind a desk to make my point. The other hosts exchanged worried glances. Whoopi Goldberg tried to intervene, clearing her throat loudly, but Joy waved her off dismissively. You know what your problem is? Joy continued, completely ignoring her co-host's obvious discomfort. You think because you play these tough characters on screen, you can intimidate people in real life. Well, newsflash, this isn't one of your movies. And you think because you have a microphone and a camera crew, you can say whatever you want without consequences? Hardy shot back. But here's the thing about real life. It tends to humble people who think they're untouchable. Is that a threat? Joy asked, her eyes lighting up with excitement. She was clearly hoping to push Hardy into saying something that would make headlines for all the wrong reasons. It's an observation, Hardy replied calmly. You've spent this entire interview trying to provoke me, and when I finally respond, you act like you're the victim. It's pathetic. Joy's smile faltered for the first time. Being called pathetic on her own show was clearly not part of her plan. Excuse me? Did you just call me pathetic? If the shoe fits, Hardy said with a shrug. You brought up my personal struggles, mocked my profession, questioned my character, and then acted surprised when I didn't just sit there and take it. What would you call that behavior? I call it doing my job. Joy snapped, her composure finally starting to crack. Unlike some people, I don't get paid millions of dollars to pretend to be someone else. I deal with reality. Reality? Hardy laughed harshly. Your reality is sitting behind that desk and tearing down people who actually create something meaningful. When's the last time you did anything that mattered beyond stirring up controversy for ratings? The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word of the exchange. Even the camera operators seemed transfixed by the verbal battle unfolding in front of them. Joy's face was turning red, a clear sign that Hardy had struck a nerve. How dare you question what I do? I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, kid. And what do you have to show for it? Hardy pressed. A career built on cheap shots and gotcha moments? At least when I pretend to be someone else, I'm honest about it. You pompous British snob, Joy snarled, finally dropping all pretense of professionalism. You come on my show and act like you're better than everyone else. Well, let me tell you something. Your accent doesn't make you smarter than the rest of us. Hardy raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her outburst. My accent? Really? That's what you're going with? I thought we were having an intellectual discussion about journalistic integrity. but apparently you'd rather focus on where I was born. Don't twist my words, Joy snapped. You know exactly what I meant. Actually, I don't, Hardy replied. Please enlighten me. What exactly did you mean by that comment? Joy realized she had painted herself into a corner. Her co-hosts were looking at her with barely concealed horror, and she could see the producers frantically gesturing from behind the cameras. I meant that you're condescending, she said weakly, trying to backtrack. You talk down to people like you, think you're superior. I talk down to people? Hardy asked incredulously. Have you listened to yourself for the past 15 minutes? You've been condescending since the moment I sat down. The difference is, I actually have something to be proud of. Oh, please, Joy scoffed, desperate to regain control of the situation. You make movies. It's not like you're curing cancer. And you host a talk show, Hardy countered. But somehow you think that gives you the right to psychoanalyze strangers and attack them personally. At least my job requires talent. The studio erupted in gasps and scattered applause. Joy's face went from red to purple as she realized the audience was clearly siding with Hardy. That's it, she said, standing up abruptly. I don't have to listen to this garbage. You're nothing but a washed-up actor who thinks he's God's gift to cinema. Washed up? Hardy smiled for the first time during the interview. I just finished filming 3 major studio pictures, but sure, I'm washed up. Meanwhile, you're stuck on daytime television picking fights with guests because your own life is so empty you need to feed off other people's drama. Joy slammed her hand on the desk, causing her co-hosts to jump. Security! Get this man out of here! Security? Hardy laughed. For what? Having a conversation? I thought this was what you wanted. You kept pushing and pushing, and now that I'm pushing back, you can't handle it. Whoopi Goldberg finally found her voice. Okay, I think we need to take a commercial break here. No, Joy said firmly. I want him gone. Now. Hardy shook his head in disbelief. Unbelievable. You start a fight, lose the fight, and then try to have me thrown out for defending myself. This is exactly the kind of behavior I was talking about. Get out, Joy screamed, pointing toward the exit. Get out of my studio. Your studio? Hardy asked mockingly. I hate to break it to you, but you don't own this place. You're just an employee, just like everyone else. Security guards were now approaching the set, looking extremely uncomfortable with the situation. They had clearly been hoping this would resolve itself without their intervention. Ma'am, one of the guards said hesitantly, maybe we should just let them work this out. No, Joy insisted. I want him removed from the building. He's being hostile and threatening. Hardy turned to the security guard with an expression of complete bewilderment. Hostile and threatening? Have you been watching the same conversation I've been having? She's the one who's been screaming and slamming things. The security guard looked between Joy and Hardy, clearly uncomfortable with the situation he had been dragged into. The studio audience was murmuring among themselves, many openly expressing their disapproval of Joy's behavior. Sir, the guard said to Hardy, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. Hardy nodded calmly. Of course, I understand you're just doing your job. Unlike some people here, I respect professionalism. Joy's face contorted with rage at the subtle dig. Don't you dare lecture anyone about professionalism after the way you've behaved on my show. Your show? Hardy turned back one final time, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. This stopped being your show the moment you decided to abandon any pretense of journalism. What this became was a public display of your own insecurities and need for attention. How dare you? Joy shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that made several audience members wince. I've been doing this job since before you were even famous. And yet you've learned nothing, Hardy replied with devastating calm. Experience without growth is just repeated failure. You've had years to develop actual interviewing skills, but instead you've chosen to become a professional antagonist. Whoopi Goldberg made another desperate attempt to regain control. Tom, maybe we should just take that break now and cool down. There's nothing to cool down from on my end, Hardy said, addressing Whoopi directly. I came here to have a professional conversation about my work. Your colleague decided to turn it into a personal attack session. I simply responded in kind. Joy was practically vibrating with fury now. Responded in kind? You insulted me, my career, and my intelligence. I held up a mirror, Hardy corrected. If you don't like what you saw reflected back, maybe you should examine your own behavior instead of blaming the mirror. The audience erupted in scattered applause, which only served to infuriate Joy further. She could see that she was losing control of her own studio, her own show, and her own narrative. This is ridiculous, she yelled, turning to the security guards. Why is he still here? I told you to remove him. Ma'am, the head security guard said diplomatically. The gentleman hasn't actually done anything wrong. He's been speaking calmly and hasn't made any threatening moves. Joy's jaw dropped. Even her own security team was refusing to blindly follow her demands. The power dynamic she was so used to wielding was crumbling before her eyes. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with venom. If nobody else will handle this, I will. She stormed around the desk, pointing her finger directly at Hardy's face. You think you're so smart with your fancy words and your superior attitude. But you know what you really are? You're just another entitled celebrity who can't handle real questions. Hardy looked down at her finger, then back at her face with an expression of genuine pity. Real questions? Is that what you call what happened here today? Because I've been in real interviews, with real journalists, who ask real questions about real topics. What you did was perform amateur-hour psychology mixed with personal attacks. I exposed you for what you really are, Joy declared triumphantly, though her victory felt hollow even to her. What am I, exactly? Hardy asked, his voice genuinely curious. Please, enlighten everyone. What terrible truth did you uncover about me during this masterful interrogation of yours? Joy opened her mouth, then closed it again. She realized she had been so focused on creating conflict that she hadn't actually exposed anything meaningful about Hardy at all. She had just made herself look petty and unprofessional. You're arrogant, she said weakly. Arrogant, Hardy repeated thoughtfully. Because I defended myself when you attacked me personally? Because I refused to sit quietly while you tried to humiliate me on television? If standing up for yourself is arrogance, then I suppose I'm guilty as charged. The studio fell silent, except for the sound of cameras continuing to roll. Everyone present knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would be talked about for years to come. Sarah Haynes, who had been silent throughout the entire exchange, finally spoke up. Maybe we should just end this segment and move on to our next topic. No, Joy said firmly. I'm not letting him get the last word. Hardy smiled sadly. This was never about getting the last word. This was supposed to be about having a conversation. But you turned it into a competition, and now you're upset that you're not winning. I am winning, Joy insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Really? Hardy gestured to the studio around them. Look around. Look at your co-hosts' faces. Listen to your audience. Does this feel like winning to you? Joy glanced around and saw exactly what Hardy was describing. Her co-hosts looked embarrassed and uncomfortable. The audience was staring at her with expressions ranging from disappointment to outright disgust. Even the crew members were shaking their heads. This is my show, she said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. It was your show, Hardy agreed gently. But shows are built on trust and respect between hosts and guests. When you break that trust, when you abandon that respect, you lose more than just one interview. You lose credibility. The security guard touched Hardy's arm lightly. Sir, I think it's time to go. Hardy nodded and began walking toward the exit. As he reached the edge of the set, he turned back one final time. For what it's worth, he said, looking directly at Joy. I actually came here hoping to have a good conversation. I've seen clips of you interviewing other guests where you were engaging and insightful. I don't know what happened to that person, but I hope you find her again. With that, Tom Hardy walked off the set, leaving behind a stunned studio and a host who had just experienced the most humbling moment of her career. The cameras kept rolling as Joy stood frozen in place, finally understanding that she had just destroyed her own credibility on live television. As the security doors closed behind Hardy, Whoopi Goldberg's voice could be heard saying, "We'll be right back after this commercial break," but everyone knew that nothing would ever be quite the same again. The most explosive interview in daytime television history was over, and Joy Behar had learned the hard way that sometimes when you play with fire, You're the one who gets burned. What did you think of this incredible clash? Was Tom Hardy justified in his responses, or should he have handled it differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and make sure to subscribe for more incredible celebrity stories that you won't believe actually happened.